Human beings live much of their lives through identification, with their thoughts, beliefs, emotions, and the story of who I am. This process of identification can feel natural and unquestioned, but it's also the source of much suffering. When we identify with fleeting mental and emotional patterns, we mistake the temporary for the permanent, the conditioned for the real. Teachers like Eckhart Tolle have pointed out that our greatest obstacle to spiritual awakening is not the outside world, but our inner identification with the mind-made self, or the ego. By learning to see this identification clearly, we can begin the journey of disidentification, moving toward freedom, presence, and peace. So what is identification? At its core, identification is the unconscious fusion between your awareness and the content of your awareness. Instead of recognizing thoughts, beliefs, and emotions as passing experiences, you take them to be me or mine. For example, when a thought like, "I'm not good enough," arises, identification makes it feel true and personal. Rather than seeing it as a conditioned thought pattern, you inhabit it, reinforcing the sense of a self built around inadequacy. Similarly, when anger arises, identification says, "I am angry," instead of recognizing that anger is arising in my awareness. This subtle but profound difference in perception shapes the way we experience ourselves and the world. Identification creates the illusion of a fixed, separate self, an identity that is fragile and constantly in need of defense, validation, and reinforcement. One of the strongest forms of identification is with beliefs. Beliefs are mental frameworks we hold about how the world works, who we are, and what is true. They can provide stability, but when we over-identify with them, they become prisons. Think of someone who believes deeply that success equals self-worth. This belief shapes their choices, drives them to overwork, and fills them with anxiety whenever they fall short of external standards or their own standards. The belief has become part of their identity. I am successful, therefore I am valuable, they might think. When beliefs are challenged, the ego or the self-concept reacts defensively because it feels as though the very core of me is under threat. This is why debates, political disagreements, or even differing worldviews can trigger intense emotions. The identification makes it difficult to simply examine or let go of a belief. Thoughts are another major source of identification. The mind generates a constant stream of commentary, judgments, and interpretations. Without awareness, you unconsciously merge with these thoughts, believing that you are the thinker and that the thoughts are you. For instance, if a thought arising says, "Nobody respects me," identification pulls you into its story. You feel hurt, resentful, or defensive. Yet the thought may be entirely untrue or based on a fleeting perception. When you are identified with thought, you are carried away like a leaf in the wind, lost in mental stories. When you're disidentified, you can witness thoughts arising and passing without being enslaved by them. Mindfulness practice is a powerful tool here. By noticing the simple arising of thoughts in the moment, without judgment or suppression, you begin to recognize them as impersonal mental events and not as me. Emotions also often become identities. People say things like, "I am sad," "I am anxious," or "I am angry." The emotional state fuses with the sense of self, and it can feel overwhelming or permanent. Take the example of grief. Someone who has lost a loved one may deeply identify with their sadness, feeling that it defines who they are. While grief is a natural and healthy response, identification can prolong suffering, making it harder to move forward. Instead, if the person can notice sadness is present, grief is moving through me, then space opens up around the emotion. The feeling is honored and felt fully, but it is no longer equated with identity. This allows the raw energy of the emotion to move through rather than becoming frozen and fixed in the body. Perhaps the deepest identification is with the idea of self itself, the mental construct of me. The self concept is made up of memories, roles, achievements, failures, and the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. For example, someone may strongly identify with being a teacher, a mother, or a victim. These identities shape their behavior and perception, but they are not who you are. The problem with identifying with this self-concept is that it's inherently unstable. Roles change, circumstances shift, bodies age, and relationships end. If we cling to these identities as our one true self, life inevitably feels threatening because change is perceived as loss of self. Awakening involves recognizing that the true self is not this ever-changing story. Identification is the root of human suffering because it ties our sense of self to impermanent, unstable, unreal phenomena. Thoughts, emotions, and roles are constantly changing, yet identification demands continuity and stability. This clash produces anxiety, fear, and dissatisfaction.